and the first 10 years of my career was spent in development management or development control as it was back then. I have been the lead contact and liaison with our appointed consultants, who were Phil Jones Associates, in preparing the design code for the town centre. So, bit of background. Unlike the Lake Districts, Mansfield is mostly a very dense urban area. It's the largest town in Nottinghamshire. Very different characteristics to the lakes, but again, the same principles. We wanted to develop a fit for purpose design code. We were one of the 25 Pathfinder local planning authorities to receive funding, in our case about £120,000, to develop the town centre code. We started in the summer of 2022 and we adopted late last year. As I mentioned, the code covers the whole of the town centre, broadly consistent with a town centre master plan that we had developed. And we adopted following, again, as Chloe said, there was fairly widespread consultation at all stages of development, and we adopted following that. We're now part of the Pathfinder 3 project that Matt was talking about in his video introduction, which seeks to look at monitoring, implementation and effectiveness of codes. So just to give a bit of context, Mansfield is a bit of a mixed bag, really. There is some beautiful parts to the town. We are blessed with having this fantastic viaduct, which you can see on the left-hand photo, which spans the whole of the town centre and forms an amazing backdrop. The photo on the right is part of the marketplace, which would probably grace any European city. Some wonderful listed buildings surrounding it, but it does have its downsides as well. The building on the left, whilst a really fine Art Deco building, has been derelict, vacant for some years. And the photo on the right demonstrates, which I suspect many of you will all be facing, vacant town centre units. So, you know, we're very much in a changing world in terms of the way that town centres operate and their offer. So we have many challenges, and one of the purposes of the design code was to try and address those. So this shows the extent of our code. Within the red line, as I mentioned earlier, it's within the it covers broadly the same areas as an adopted town centre master plan, essentially within the town centre ring road. We felt that the town centre is really quite a manageable area for a design code. I think when we start to grapple the district-wide code, I think it will throw up a few more challenges, but town centre codes, you know, are eminently manageable area. So the plan here is the whole of the code. It shows listed buildings, non-designated heritage assets. It shows some of the green areas, some of the key links, and the numbers on there show 16 key development sites that were addressed as part of the code. It also shows areas that are prone to flooding, and, you know, potential areas for sustainable drainage. So the content of the code, we had there were three main sections to the code. So we had town-wide rules, which, as the name suggests, cover all of the town centre and apply to all developments. And they looked at issues such as heritage, making sure that developments are sympathetic to the historic environment, maintaining the street network and not interrupting the historic street network, looking at the potential to deliver green infrastructure and biodiversity. There were then area-wide rules that applied to three specific areas. I'll come on to that a little later in my presentation, but these were essentially based around the heritage assets and the likelihood of finding heritage assets in those areas. So we apply a higher level of control where there are more heritage assets, and we have a more flexible approach where there are fewer heritage assets. So some of the issues that were looked at under the area-wide rules were things like sort of density, block form, height, materials, active frontage and relationship to the street. We then have site-specific rules. As you'll see from the previous plan, there were 16 specific development and public realm sites. and these specific rules were related to providing more detailed guidance on those. And again, it looked in more detail at things like street connectivity, where you can reintroduce the historic street pattern, introducing the Ginnell or Jitty network, heights of buildings, and more specifically materials. So these are the area types. So you'll see on the plan here that the gold areas are the conservation areas with heritage assets, where we apply probably the greatest level of protection. The grey areas are non-conservation areas but with heritage assets, and the blue areas are all remaining sites. So in terms of the status of our code, we have adopted the code, say late last year, as a statement of council policy. We decided not to pursue it as a supplementary planning document. The primary reason for that, after much debate, was that, as you're all aware, you cannot introduce new policy through supplementary planning document. And given that our code is very much couched in terms of it being rules, both town-wide, area-wide and site-specific, we went down the approach of adopting it as a statement of council policy. We didn't feel that that would cause us any detriment, given that it's gone through a very hefty consultation process, it was consistent with government guidance, and has been through a very rigorous political process. We felt that it'd been through the same process as an SPD, and therefore in decision making and the balance, we felt we could apply the same weight as an SPD. I think if we would have had the ability at the time to have gone down the supplementary plan route, I think that's probably what we would have done. And when that's introduced through regulation, either when we review the design code or we do the district-wide design code, I think that's the most likely route that we will pursue. We are at the moment reviewing our local plan, and I think the intention is either to have a policy hook for the design code within that, or incorporate a lot of the code within policy within the local plan. There is the ability through the code to, we are looking to make sure that all developments comply, and that's why we set out rules rather than ifs and shoulds. That they are musts, wills within the code, but there is the ability where there is non-compliance to go through design review panel. We're quite fortunate in our part of the East Midlands to have a well-established review panel that we can refer to. Okay, so how is the code being used? We have a number of, unfortunately at this point in time, we actually don't have any submitted planning applications, but we have multiple pre-application discussions that are going on. A couple of these are probably easy wins where they are local authority owned sites. So therefore we have a willing partner to apply the code. We've always made the code available early on in discussions just to make sure that there is compliance and it follows the principles and the rules within the code. We explain clearly what the status of the code is, and that it will be a material consideration that we apply substantial weight to in the decision-making process. At this point in time, most of the schemes appear to be code compliant, following a few amendments. I think the true test will always be when we're faced with a more hostile developer and we have to consider it through appeal. So the example that we'll use is called White Hart Street. It's a site that is owned by the district council. You'll see here, this is how the design code approached it. So it looked at several new linkages. It identified the key heritage, both designated and non-designated heritage assets. It looked at creating new links to reintroduce the historic street network, and you'll see that the letters and numbers there apply to the rules within the code, both area-wide, town-wide and site-specific. The emerging scheme that has arisen from the use of the code is this. Still a bit of work in progress, but it shows again that it's followed the key historic links, it's retained the non-designated heritage assets, It's hoping to be sympathetic to the designated heritage assets, and this is very much work in process, but we are really confident at this point in time that it will be code compliant. So, like our friends in the Lake District, we have a coding checklist. We are looking to add that to our local validation checklist, and we are just at the point of starting to consult on that before doing so. We have two checklists. These are available on our website at the moment. One is for small schemes where the development management officer will use the checklist to see and check compliance. And major schemes, we expect the developer to complete the compliance checklist, but also will be obviously double checked by ourselves and our development management colleagues. There's been quite a hefty amount of training of both officers and members in terms of using the code. That's both into giving them the confidence to use the code, but also how to use the code. So that's just an example there of the compliance checklist for major schemes. So it's not all been smooth. We are in a very fortunate position that politically there's been a lot of support for the code, and officers are very much on board with it as well. I think there's some discomfort in terms of providing rules. It's not the normal sort of planning approach in the planning balance, and I think some of our DM officers felt a little uncomfortable with using rules as opposed to guidance. There is some uncertainty over the weight that can be given to the code in the planning balance, but again, once we get a couple of appeals under our belt, then I think we'll feel a little more confident. But at this point in time, we are giving it substantial weight. We have given substantial member training to understand the role and status of the code. And as I mentioned earlier, we are yet to be challenged at the appeal, and it's still early days, so I'm sure that we'll learn a lot as we progress. We are very reluctant to add additional burdens onto our DM officers, as we all know at the moment, things like biodiversity net gain, there's so much expectation on DM officers, and we want to make it as straightforward as possible in terms of using the code. We do have a large turnover of staff, like most authorities at the moment, and we are trying to train our new members of the team as they arrive with us. So